All right, everyone. Thank you for hanging in there with us. We knew we might have some challenges switching over to the passcode, but actually today the challenge what seemed to be Zoom not letting our featured artist in. We now have Dorothy in the session. So thanks for hanging in there with us, Dorothy. Thanks for sticking with it. It should ask you if you want to start your video too, and then we'll get you all the way in live and be good to start. As we begin this morning, just a couple of quick announcements. Number one is that many of you saw the passcode was here. Number two, today is the last day to register for our current enrollment for the Art Business Academy. And then number three is that this is my last week in Pine Top. We're winding down our summer season here, getting ready to head back to Scottsdale. And as I head back to Scottsdale, we've got several big projects that we're going to be working on, getting the gallery ready for the season, of course, being the primary one, and then a couple of other projects. So we are going to take a little bit of a hiatus from the online critique group for a few weeks, beginning next week. So that first Wednesday of October, we will not have a session, and probably the following 2 weeks as well. It'll depend a little bit on how well our projects come together, but do not despair. We will be back here towards the end of October. We're also preparing some new features and some new approaches to our online critique group that I think are going to be kind of fun. So be sure and keep an eye out for the email letting you know that we're ready to get started with the online critique group again. You can kind of consider this our fall break if you want to. And then when we get back, we're going to dive in and be sharing a lot more work and giving you some more opportunities to participate and share your work in, I think, some unique ways. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But with that said, let's jump in and welcome our featured artist, Dorothy Mcginnis. Dorothy, thank you for joining us. And let's begin by talking a little bit about your background and how you came to create the work that you're creating and where you're located.
Well, hi, Jason. Thanks for having me. I live in Everett, Washington, which is about 25 miles north of Seattle. I started baking baskets. Basically, I took a class over 30 years ago, and I found it very intriguing. So I continued to take classes. I, did a lot of workshops, learning lots of different materials and techniques, and then about in 2000, I took a workshop involving using paper as a weaving material. And basically, I just kind of went from there. I've always been interested in the various technical aspects of the process.
So let's pull up your work because just from that introduction and saying basket weaving, if someone is here and didn't look at your work, they're going to have a picture in their mind of what you do, and it's going to be, I suspect, very different from what
Yes.
you actually do and create. Let's talk a little bit about that as we look at your work. Um, you know, you're not creating baskets. Let's be very clear about that.
Yeah,
Talk
sculptural.
about kind of the evolution. Did you start out creating more traditional baskets and vessels and those kinds of things and then move into the work that you're doing, or how did that come about?
Yeah, definitely. I learned all the classic baskets in terms of styles and techniques, materials. But as time went on, I got different ideas in my head for trying to put things together differently. And basically, I'm always asking myself, what if I do this, or what if I try that, and how will it all turn out? And basically, the over the years, the work has become more and more sculptural. I do, still do occasional pieces that are more vessel-like, but I definitely am off the scale in terms of baskets. I use the techniques, the basketry techniques, but I don't actually make quote unquote baskets.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the kind of your process for coming up with the compositions and designs and what's inspiring you to create these pieces. And also, I'd love you to comment on the kind of the choice of palette that you're using.
In terms of the how they come, really, it's I play with how can I put things together. If I weave things a certain way, certain pieces together, because a lot of my work is done in modularly kind of. I do different sections and weave them together. In terms of my color palette, I'm always just playing with color, I guess. I don't have any specific thoughts about color other than, I mean, I know the basics about, color groupings, but I don't I'm not thinking about the color so much, I guess. I'm usually just really working on how are the pieces going to come out together. And sometimes they come out great, and sometimes they don't come out so great at all, or they come out totally different than what I think I'm going to get. I get, something totally much more interesting than I thought it was going to. So, I don't know what
And
else to
what
say about that.
about your experience showing the work? Where have you shown it? What have people's responses been to the work? What is your experience in terms of sharing it with collectors and potential buyers?
In terms of shows that, I do a lot of I've entered quite a few, national craft shows or other types of shows. And in terms of people that when, I've been in a show like a solo show or something, I always get great responses from people about, what the work looks like, and, and they're usually amazed about, the material and how did I do that? And I don't sell as much as you'd think in terms of the number of people who said that my work is great, but, that's just kind of a process of finding the right audience that will spend the money
Yeah,
on it, I
yeah, and
suppose.
definitely would be the next challenge. And I really want to dive in and talk about that because you're creating work that is in an interesting space. You mentioned craft shows, and I think there has long been this sense in the art world that there's this hard line between fine art and craft, or maybe between fine art and fine craft. And this line I think is starting to blur, or has blurred quite significantly over the last really over the last couple of decades, as you've seen art galleries and in fact some art galleries zeroing in and really focusing on work that is traditionally might have been considered, or techniques that might have been considered craft. And you're starting to see a wider audience of collectors that are interested in having and showing and displaying work that is not traditional media that you might associate with quote unquote fine art. And so, Dorothy, have you kind of experienced some of that? Are you seeing that, or maybe let me put it this way: has it been a challenge for you um, to figure out and present your work to traditional fine art markets, to galleries? Have you made any attempts in that regard? What has the response been?
I haven't done much, attempts to do many galleries. I've done a few. Most of the time, they like the work, but they're not interested in showing it. I do find that, at least in the basketry world, most fine art think basketry is probably the lowest of the low. But
And
that's
I
just
think
most
that
of the
that
time
is
they're not interested
a pretty
at
serious
least in
mistake. I
the
think
basketry world,
that
basketry is probably the lowest of the
there
low.
would be
But
a
from,
real audience.
interactions from the article, yeah,
Let's
I
open
mean,
this up. I would
I just
love
haven't.
to get some reactions and comments from those of you who are in the panel or who are in the session today. And hold on, let me get it so I can see you. There we go. If you have some comments or thoughts, I would love to get just first impressions on the work, how it strikes you. And also, as we traditionally do, let's open the conversation by also talking about the consistency of the work. What do you see in terms of the craft and the consistency? And so, if you want to hop in, If you're in the video, you can throw a hand up in the air and I can see you and invite you in that way. If you're just in the audio stream and you click on your hand, that will let me know that you want to come in and I can bring in your audio. I'm going to start with Gay. Gay, it should be giving you the opportunity to unmute here. I'd love to get your response and reaction. Good morning, Gay.
Good morning, everyone. I just have to say that I would encourage you to put aside the words basket weaving anywhere. Not because it isn't a wonderful and a good thing, but these are sculptures. These sculptural forms are extremely beautiful and intricate. The idea that you have taken something which is not fluid and made it look like it's moving are enormously wonderful selling points. And I just want to encourage you, like Jason does, you just haven't found your outlet and your audience yet. Because when I looked at the orange and dark brown one, I thought it was fabric. I really did. I thought she started on fabric, but you haven't. So all I'm saying to you is I think these are wonderful. They are well presented, and I find them individually very beautiful and unique. And those, to me, are really what so much art is about.
Yeah, let me echo that. I think that Gabe makes a very good point in terms of kind of thinking about how we talk about
Right.
And promote the work. In that you know, if to the extent that there may be some kind of lingering stigma or something about basket weaving or any other you know, fiber arts and those kind of things. You know, those kind of prejudices that might be lingering in the market. It's not a bad idea to kind of think about how we are phrasing our conversation about the work. I like this idea of talking about it as sculpture, and really weaving is the medium, but the result is sculpture. And I just anyone who would look at this work, I think would just get a sense of that kind of interest and awe, and would want to understand a little bit the process of putting them together. But I agree with Gay that it's a good idea to start out from a point of talking about it as sculpture. Other comments and thoughts. Let me go, Stephen. Let me get you unmuted there. It should be asking you to unmute, and then I've got a couple of you over in the audio panel as well. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. I have to say that these images stopped me in my tracks. And I think it has to do with just what we've all been talking about, except that basket making is the technique, but that's the same as saying oil painting is the technique. It's what we do with it. And these ideas are just so incredibly informed. I mean, okay, now here's the Mobus strip, which is the one that I started with. And I said, well, I know about Mobus strips. Okay, I mean, it's a single surface that's two-sided. And then I knew that, and I'm looking at this, and I'm still looking at this, and I have no way of knowing how it actually exists, which is stunning. And I guess I think I used the word transcendent, which is exactly where we're going if we're approaching art, because art does transcend all of this stuff. And
now,
so these
Stephen,
are not...
in your, I think you submitted a comment, and you made an interesting comment about thinking about bases for these pieces. I'd love to get you to just expand on that a little bit. I put the comment in here, but we might as well talk about it since you're here.
Yeah, okay. These are objects, and I think they have to have a place. They have to have a space. And if they're just laying on a surface like this one is, it doesn't allow them to be what they are. So if there were a small base, I'm pointing at it, but nobody can see my fingers, so why am I bothering? If there were, like, let's say a piece of walnut wood, I mean, I'm just making this up, that is maybe a ½ an inch thick, something that just lifts this up, it becomes a sculpture once there's a base, and then the shadows then can be cast onto the surface. And I think that's where all of these need to go. Because what I'm seeing is that
It's,
they're laying on
I
a
think this is
surface.
a really interesting idea. And certainly as I show sculpture in the gallery, much of that sculpture is exactly as Stephen's talking about, is on some kind of base that brings it up and sets it apart. I struggle a little bit, and I think I hear Stephen struggling a little bit too, to think about, okay, exactly what would that base be and what would it look like? What would the shape of it be? How do you have that base there without detracting from and getting in the way of the kind of organic forms that we have here? But I agree with the idea that it would be worth exploring that concept. That if this were mounted on some kind of base, and maybe it's even Stephen mentions wood or walnut. I could even picture something like a marble, a white
Mhm.
marble or something along those lines that
Mhm.
is also a natural material and is white and kind of helps set the work apart, or even an onyx or a granite could be interesting. Now, obviously, that changes the dynamics fairly significantly of how the work is displayed, the price points of the work, and there'd be a lot to think about there. But Dorothy, I think well, let's put it this way first. Have you considered or thought about adding a base or something else to display, or what has been your process for figuring out how to show these pieces?
I've never even thought of putting them on a base. It's never even been a consideration. I mean, it's a good thought. I mean, I'm not sure about the process of deciding which ones would be that way and what that material would be, but yeah, that's an interesting thought. It's never occurred to me before.
Yeah, and so it might be worth talking to. You might not have someone in your area, but you could go online. I might suggest looking in the Loveland, Colorado area, where there are many foundries and sculptors, and consequently a lot of businesses that are kind of in the support of that, including base makers. It might be worth just having a conversation with one of them and say, I'm going to send you some photos. I would love to hear your thoughts on the possibilities of what we might be able to do. And I think that as you do that, um, you would then potentially start to be thinking about moving into a little bit of a different realm in terms of venues to show the work and also price points. But I don't want to get to prices yet because we're going to talk about prices in just a few minutes. But I do want to get just a couple more of you in with reactions if I can. Let me go to Dolores. And Dolores, it should be asking you to unmute. Good morning.
Good morning. I've been sending messages to everybody in the panel about my opinions on the work, which I think is stunning. And it's sculpture. I mean, people don't use the word basketry. It's not. That's
I think we
irrelevant.
maybe are coming to a consensus on that one.
Yes, this has to be promoted as sculpture. And I think that if you begin thinking in terms of scale, you can become even more unique, if that makes any sense, because scaled up, some of these things can be dynamite, in my opinion.
Yes, I got several comments through the form bringing up that exact same point, Dolores. That thinking about and not to say that these are tiny pieces. I mean, this one we're looking at right now at 27 inches long. That is a significant sculpture.
I'm talking about scale, big.
Yeah, Dorothy. Let me ask you about that. In terms of the process, what are the limitations in terms of the potential size of the work? Could you scale these up and do larger pieces?
The largest piece I've ever done is about 4 feet tall, and about 24 inches across. So I mean, yes, I can weave bigger pieces. I just don't very often because they're even more difficult to find a venue for than smaller pieces. I mean, I only do local shows with those because I just can't imagine the price that it would cost to ship it. But yeah, I could do larger pieces. So I have on occasion, but they have their own issues.
Yeah. Well,
when it comes to that.
I agree though with Dolores that this idea of adding into the mix some larger pieces would then potentially position you in a place where when you're talking to a gallery, and um, I'll use myself as an example, that often both with two-dimensional and three-dimensional art, as I'm considering an artist's work, I like to think about having a range of different scaled work to show and display. Not only, first and foremost, because I find that having a larger piece gives you a kind of wow factor. It draws people to the work. It also then gives them something to contrast against as they're looking at the other pieces. Wow, the scale of this piece is spectacular. But look at these other interesting pieces, and ooh, we have a space for something like that. And it just creates a conversation and a kind of dynamic that encourages the sale of all of the work, that draws attention to all of it. It also kind of creates some psychology of pricing effects where we can have that larger piece at a significant, strong price point, which then sets the market for the other pieces. In other words, people come into the gallery and they've never seen an artist who's doing this kind of weaving and using these kind of materials to create the sculpture. And so they have no idea how it should be valued, how they should value that work. And so we have to kind of set the market for them by having them be able to see a variety of different pieces. And now, instead of working the framework of, well, is basketry really worth what this artist is asking for it? Instead, they're asking, well, this moderately sized piece, it makes sense that it's priced as it is because look at the price of this larger work. And that's a better conversation to be having. So, it's something for all of us to consider when we're offering our artwork for sale or for display in a gallery, that it's a good idea to have a little bit of a range of price points. And then, of course, also, we often have clients who come into the gallery and they need a significant piece of artwork. They've got a large space that is central to their home or to their workspace where they just need a knockout. And for them, the higher price point is not a stumbling block. It's part of their enjoyment of filling that space. And so, this summer we've had some significant purchases of large pieces. And so being able to offer that, and of course, the higher sale price point that is generated from that can be very positive. So certainly, Dorothy, it sounds like you've already done some scaled work. I would consider doing that. As far as the logistics of it, I promise you that the shipping can be figured out as we figure out the market for your work, and especially as you begin thinking about working with galleries. Those logistics can all be worked through. And just to be fair to those of us who are maybe watching this session who are, for example, glass artists who are working at a large scale, they're looking at your work and saying, oh man, I wish it were as easy to ship my work as it would be to ship this work. Because the challenges are going to be very different. You're going to be dealing just with volume, and that can be solved pretty easily. And in fact, when you get to that point, reach out to me because I'll have some suggestions to make about how you can deal with the logistics of shipping those larger pieces. Now let's jump forward a little bit and let's go ahead and talk about pricing. And I know I still have others of you with comments. We'll try and leave a few minutes at the end to talk about your additional comments. And we already talked a little bit about consistency. We usually spend quite a bit of time talking about consistency, but I think that it's fairly easy to see here that the technique and the design aesthetic of these pieces would leave no doubt in anyone's mind who is seeing any of this work that these were all created by the same artist, that there is a vision behind the work, There's some experimentation, obviously, and some variation in terms of how they're put together and the palette that's being used. None of that matters because there is such a strong underlying theme and as I say, design to the work that, you know, in a gallery or show, I would not perceive that you'd have any challenge with the question of consistency. Which brings us then to pricing. Dorothy, talk to us about what your approach has been in valuing the work. How did you arrive? We're looking at a piece right now that's 20 inches in scale, and it's priced at $800. Tell us why and how.
The only thing I've ever come up with is time. I keep track of my time, not, minute by minute or anything, but, a general idea of what the time is. And I added on time for, processing the paper and multiply by an hourly rate and, put on a little bit for overhead and, and then double it for retail. That's basically my process.
And I suspect, and you don't have to tell us if you don't want to, but I suspect that hourly rate is a lot lower than the rest of us will think you should be getting for this work. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't imagine that these come together quickly. You're not, producing one of these in a few hours.
None of the ones I've shown. I charge $15 an hour, but at this point in time, I started out at 10, but now I do 15.
Minimum wage.
Yeah, and so
but
I suspect we will all agree that you are underpaying yourself pretty significantly for the amazing work that you are creating here. If we think about some other jobs out there that are producing a $15 an hour wage, I just think we can see pretty quickly that we would want you to be doing better than that. And so I would love to, let's go ahead and open that up for a little bit of discussion. Well, let's do it this way. We've never done it quite this way before. I want a number from those of you, and I'm going to go ahead and lower everybody's hand so we can get new comments in. You can re-raise them later on if you want to get back in with your previous comment. But this is the question. If you were to walk into a gallery and see a piece like one of these that we're looking at, what would you expect that work to be priced at? What would you expect for a retail value on the work that we're seeing? Go. Jump in with a hand, and let's talk a little bit about the pricing and why you might think it would be that way. And again, if I don't get any volunteers, I will volunteer you and put you on the spot. Anyone want to hop in? Gay, go ahead. I've got Gay.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. We've got you.
Okay. Listen, if I just did the terms of my own paintings and apply them to her square inches, let me see. Just if you do that, she's almost tripling her prices, which may be too much. But I think that was very interesting for me to do, because this one, 2, 7 by 8, is just would be like $4,000 or $5,000. Maybe that's too much. But I'm just saying that if she just took the rubrics that some of us have gone through in our coursework, her prices would easily double.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got one for easily double, maybe even more than that. Let me go to Terry and see if what Terry thinks. Terry, it should be, there we go. Gotcha.
Hi. I was not going to double, but I was going to go up about 50%.
Yeah.
I think to start with. And then my thing about the pricing on this is that I think your job is to show us with your prices just how valuable it is. And I think that's something that you can do by raising your prices significantly. The zigzag 2, I would bring it up to about 1,500. So that one I might double. Some of the others I would go up 50% at least at the beginning. And I had one more comment about pricing, and I think Jason was calling it the psychology of pricing or something.
Sure.
I think if you had a book made of your work, your collection, and people seeing it on the backgrounds that you're showing it to us on instead of amidst other artwork in the gallery, people can have an idea of what impact that can have in their own home. They make standalone visuals in a book. I don't know if you're willing to do that or what other people think of that, but I think that would raise your pricing quite a bit. So just
yeah, no, Terry, that you make a very good point, and this would be something that a gallery would need to think about and consider as they're showing the work. How are we going to display this work in a way that allows it to be seen and appreciated, and to get the kind of effect that we're getting through these photographs? And by the way, Dorothy, I congratulate you on the quality of the images that you have here. It's clear, this would not have the same impact if you were shooting it on a table with, your messy studio in the background. It's clear that you've
No.
put some real thought into how to set the work off. A piece like this, how to get it to pop. And I think that gradient going from the light to the dark really helps us see some of the contrasting values across the work. And so by having that photography, and I think Terry makes a very good point, for a portfolio or for creating a book, to be able to show people and kind of emphasize that could be very powerful. But the gallery is going to need to think about this too. How am I going to place my pedestals in such a way, and if I were approaching this, I would not have some pedestals out in the middle of my space with the work on it, where there's going to be a lot of distraction and visual noise around the work. I would want to be thinking about putting these against a wall so that you get that same kind of effect of having them pop. But then showing the book, has the added power of, people are impressed by things that are in print, even if you put it in print yourself. And I agree. I think just having those visuals and setting it apart, I agree with Terry that the value of this work could easily move into that 1.5 to 2 times what we're currently seeing. Elizabeth, I see you had a comment. Let me get you in.
Hi. I'm just going to say that everything that you and Terry are talking about, I think is a great idea. And I was wondering, Dorothy, if you've ever attached these to a wall. Instead of putting them on a pedestal, have you ever attempted to just have that white wall or that light gray wall that you could actually put the sculpture itself on a wall? I don't know if that would even work, but I think the presentation of that would be kind of cool. Or hanging it.
Yeah.
Especially if you do the large ones. I think, Jason, you may have even alluded to that, hanging in a foyer or an atrium style type of presentation. And I definitely think that doubling or more of your prices would be very beneficial. I think you'd get a lot more attention if you did that too.
Yeah, so Dorothy, let's get your response to that first. Would it be desirable and feasible to have some of this work displayed hanging?
I've done a few pieces that I actually constructed for hanging, but part of the problem is you'd have to work out a way to hang it so that you didn't damage the paper, because paper's not, you'd have to figure out a way to make it so the weight of the piece does not do damage in terms of hanging. I have thought of, there's another technique I do that for hanging pieces, but I haven't, I don't do that very often. Most of my pieces are definitely for pedestals.
And then what about this idea of increasing the prices pretty significantly?
I don't have a problem with that. Per se. I don't think I'm necessarily out of the range in terms of some other basket makers, but I know nobody else does what I do. So
yes.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with increasing.
And what you just said is very important. And this is very natural for us to do, where we, there's a tendency for us to try and fit ourselves into the marketplace. Okay, how much are other basket weavers charging for their work? likewise, it's a natural for us to say, well, I'm pretty early in my career. I don't have a lot of exposure, so I'm going to compare myself to other artists who are early in our career. But what we need to realize is that is not the comparison that a collector is going to make when they're looking at your work. And that's not the comparison that a gallery owner is going to make when they're looking at your work. And what I encourage us to think about the value of our work in a more aspirational way, that we think instead of, well, what would people be willing to pay for my work? And then falling into the trap of thinking, well, if I raise my prices, it's never going to sell in the venues where I've been showing my work, and I'll be way outpriced from those venues. And I think that trap is dangerous because it prevents us from thinking about the possibilities of where our work could be. I could be showing my work in a fine art gallery in a major art market, and the collectors who see the work in that venue are going to walk in and they're going to see this piece priced at $3,000 or $3,500, and they're going to say, "Oh my goodness, this is gorgeous. How is it possible that this is so inexpensive? I just can't comprehend this. Here's my credit card." That is what I would hope we're aspiring toward, is to be getting our work into venues where it's appreciated as it should be, and where it's generating the interest and the sales that are possible for our work. And we kind of can't know that until we start getting it out there and showing it. But I love the numbers that have been thrown out there so far. I certainly could see, I mean, this would be a good example of one of those pieces that kind of helps set the market. And certainly at 3,000, 3,500, it would then help something like this, which might be at 1,450 to 1,650. Again, I just don't think you would meet much resistance in that, in that pricing strategy. And the one last thing I'll mention in that regard is that we also need to consider that when we're talking to a gallery, if that's where we're aiming to show the work, it is inevitable that the gallery owner, it's almost automatic that it's going to happen, that the gallery owner is going to look at the work and they're going to be doing some math. And the math that they're going to be doing is to say, okay, the gallery commission at 50% of this piece is going to be $380. That doesn't make sense. I can't afford to give space to this piece at $380, no matter how quickly I was able to sell it. So we've got to think kind of a little bit about all of that. But more importantly, I would just want us to go out and kind of look at the galleries that we aspire to show our work in, and see the price points of other work that are in those galleries, regardless of the fact that it's not going to be the same technique as yours. Obviously, you're doing something very unique, but you're going to want to be putting your work into a range where people will be able to appreciate it at the same level they're appreciating the other work in those galleries. We're quickly running out of time for this session, and let's go ahead and let me pull myself out of here, and let's open it up for any other comments or suggestions or questions that you might have for Dorothy. Tim, let me get Tim in with a comment or a question. Good morning, Tim.
Yeah, there are a few things. I kept raising my hand and lowering it because people were answering my questions. And I think one thing is you do have to sort of cleanse your mind of saying weaving, basket weaving, because you've gone way beyond that, light years. And the works are so outstanding that I think they're sculpture, and they really are. And you need to have some kind of thing to put them on, like a pedestal or whatever, that other sculpture, the professional sculpture, are put on. And I think the pricing also, you need to find venues that aren't sort of, I think, even beyond craft venues, where you're going into major markets. I mean, I'm doing what Jason said, where you get 100 galleries together, and I'm dealing with New York now. I've got Maine and Boston areas near I live. And New York is something you should look at, because yours are so out there, and New York is out there. I mean, went to art schools there and the galleries and everything. And I mean, out there in a good way. I don't mean out there in a, you know, so
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah,
need,
yeah, Tim, let me jump in there and just say that it's not inconceivable, and obviously we don't want to trade in fantasies or things like that. But let's just be honest that we have all been in an art gallery before, where we have seen something that's not nearly as interesting as this, and you know, doesn't have the same dynamics, that was priced at $40,000 or $50,000. And so, you know, I'm not suggesting that we want to jump in and start throwing a bunch of zeros onto things, but I think it's an illustration of the fact that values in the art market are, to a large extent, arbitrary, and that you know, knowing that that by setting our values, we get to pick the context and the venues where our work is going to be seen. And so I would echo what everyone else has been saying and encourage Dorothy to think about moving those prices in a more aggressive direction. And, you know, that may require then to reach out to venues that you just haven't considered it up to this point, or that you haven't reached out to, and giving them the opportunity to respond to and potentially show the work. Let me see if I can get just one or two more of you in. Cassandra, let's see if we can get you in.
Hi, good morning.
Gotcha.
You hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi, good morning. Hi, Dorothy. I think your work is brilliant. And it seems like you have a love for astronomy. Right away, I think space and these amazing dimensions, that the quality of your work, it just feels like the fabric of space and all of those unique dimensions that Einstein unveiled in the past. And there's that feeling to it. And so it goes along with the sculptural element, but then there's the scientific element to it. And I just feel like it seems like it would be really amazing to have it almost mobile, hanging up where you can see underneath and around and inside, because that obviously it's taken you years to be, you know, really good at what you do. So.
Yeah, you know, I think we're all kind of excited by the possibilities. We're seeing what you're doing, Dorothy, and we're seeing that there are just so many possibilities and opportunities for you to show the work in unique ways, to share it with many more people maybe than have had the opportunity to see at this point, and to achieve some real success in your career, which then allows you to just continue doing and sharing even more with the work that you're doing. And so, we have run ourselves over our time for today's session. And Dorothy, I want to just thank you for letting us look at your work and talking to us about it. And I'd just like to close giving you the opportunity to respond to what you've heard and what you think might be the next steps or the next phase in pushing forward with your work.
Oh, well, I'd just like to thank you for having me on and everybody's comments. A comment about the astronomy was interesting because I hadn't really thought about that, but I'm definitely a math person, so that fits there. And definitely I'll think about, you know, pedestals, and I'll increase my prices, and you know, try to find some true venues that will work out well for me. Thank you.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Dorothy. And thanks to everyone for joining us for this session. Dorothy, we're going to look forward to keeping an eye on what you're doing and to staying in touch with you. And as I always do, I would encourage us to, Dorothy, do you have a social media presence where we can follow you, or a newsletter that we can sign up to? What would be the best way for us to keep track of what you're doing?
At the moment, I just have a website, DorothyMcGinnisBasket.com.
Okay, good.
I think I'm in the midst of thinking about getting a better website than what I have. So.
Yeah, well, all parts of the process, and I think we're all going to encourage you to think about changing your domain name to drop the word basket from it, and we'll look forward to keeping up with you. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us for this session. Again, we're going to be on pause for a few weeks going into the first part of October. Just keep an eye on your email, and I'll let you know when our next session is coming up and who our next featured artist is. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. Take care.